Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Triangle Center for Spiritual Living. I do know that we have a number of first-time visitors today, so for those of you that don't know me, my name is Reverend Dusty Ripplemeyer. I have the distinct pleasure and privilege of being the senior minister of this amazing, amazing community. We are a Science of Mind community, part of a larger organization called Centers for Spiritual Living, which means that we teach and practice the teachings of Ernest Holmes. We believe that there is just one God, and that God is benevolent and loving and eternal and within everything and everyone on the planet. We also believe that there is power for creation, a power for good in the life and in the world, and that we have access to that. We can use it. We co-create with God lives that we absolutely love to live. And so we come together quite often during the week to celebrate that fact and to support each other on our spiritual path. So I'm very, very glad that you are here with us today. Thank you very much. Thank you to all of the regular attendees, and thank you to those of you who have allowed us to come into your home today through the power of technology. Thank you very much, very much.
And the reading this morning is by Kay Warren in her book, Choose Joy, because happiness is not enough. Joy is a choice. The level of joy you experience is completely and totally up to you. It is not dependent on anyone else, what they do or don't do, how they behave or don't behave. Joy cannot be manipulated by the actions of puny human beings. It is not dependent on the amount of sadness or suffering or difficulties you endure. Joy cannot be held hostage to fear, pain, anger, disappointment, sadness, or grief. At the end of any given day, the amount of joy you experienced is the exact amount of joy you chose to experience. You, my friend, are in charge. The sooner you embrace this pivotal reality, the sooner you can begin to live a more joyful life. And so it is.
Thank you. So can you tell we're talking a little bit about joy today? I think it's already permeated everything. There's a lot of tomfoolery going on. I like it, however. So good morning to those of you who may have just arrived in the sanctuary. The theme for the month of April is Transformation and Evolution, and my talk title today is Created by Joy. Now, our human lives on the planet are filled with all kinds of different experiences. Some of these we consider some of the sweetest moments when everything just seems to be going perfectly, when all is right with the world and all of our fondest hopes and wildest desires come true. But there's also other moments in which nothing seems to go right, when everything that could go wrong goes wrong, and all of our fondest hopes and our wildest dreams appear to be shattered. It could be the loss of a job or an illness that takes over our lives, or perhaps a catastrophic natural event, or the transition of a loved one, or the inhumane treatment of animals, or the struggles of humanity throughout the world. These are moments when our hearts ache with grief so powerful that it threatens to break us down, to bring us to our knees. Sometimes it feels as though life comes in waves. We experience a wave that we might think feels good and pleasurable. And then we feel right on the heels of that wave, a wave that feels bad, and the circumstances don't feel so pleasurable. It may feel as though we are living our lives like hills and valleys, that sometimes we're up and sometimes we're down. Have you ever wondered why some people are able to experience deep and authentic joy in their daily lives, no matter what they are going through, and other people cannot seem to experience any joy, no matter how hard they search? In her book, Choose Joy, Kay Warren tells us that the research says that we all fall somewhere on a bell curve. That over here on this side of the bell curve are those people who really don't have any struggle experiencing joy. Their natural tendency is to be very upbeat. They have a very positive attitude. The glass is always half full. Then the majority of us typically fall somewhere in the middle of that bell curve. You know, life isn't awful. We're pretty happy. Not too up and not too down. We don't typically get too discouraged or depressed. We might say that we're a little tired or maybe a little bored by the daily routine, but we're very quick to say that nothing is really wrong, that everything is pretty good. And then as you come down that other end of the bell curve, there are a group of people for whom merely getting out of bed every morning becomes a struggle. That laughter and joy do not seem to be a part of their everyday life. The joy has just simply seemed to have evaporated. Now, this might be a very normal response to a change in jobs or a physical illness or grief or loss. But if we are not able to move through those moments, we can find ourselves mired in despair. Now, I believe that in our humanness, that at any given point in our lives, that we can find ourselves anywhere on that bell curve. And we typically do based on the external circumstances of our lives or the relationships of our lives. How are they going? And then we find ourselves someplace on that bell curve, but does it have to be that way? Now, I think one of the most important questions that we need to begin with this morning is around our definition of joy. Many people believe that joy is synonymous with happiness. And the truth is that they're not really synonymous. Some of us might assume that having happy feelings means that we are joyful, or having a lack of happy feelings means that we are not in joy. But again, that is not really the truth. Happiness is often seen as dependent on our external circumstances, but that's not the truth about joy. Joy has absolutely nothing to do with our external circumstances. It has absolutely nothing to do with how we feel. It is much deeper, much richer, much more stable, and definitely much more accessible than we might actually think. Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama got together. Can you imagine it? They hung out together for a week. And this author, whose name is Douglas Abrams, got to hang out with them. What an amazing time that would be. And they co-wrote together a book called The Book of Joy. And I believe there's nobody else on the planet that could write a book about joy better than these two. I've never actually been in the presence of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, but I have been in the Dalai Lama's presence, and I will tell you that, he'll just be sitting there, and then all of a sudden a little smile will break out on his lips, as though laughter is just trying to bust out of him at all times. It's just simply amazing. And the videos that I've seen of Desmond Tutu, it's the same. So they got together and they looked at many of the questions that I believe are on our minds as we are thinking about this idea of joy. And some of those questions might include, is it really possible to be joyful even in the face of our daily problems? How do we embrace the reality of our lives, denying nothing but transcend the pain and the suffering? And lastly, even when our lives are good, how do we live in joy when so many others are suffering? Great questions, yes? Now, as Kay Warren said in her reading of the day, joy is a choice. Probably not something you wanted to hear this morning. But joy is a choice. The level of joy that we experience is completely and totally up to us. That at the end of any given day, the amount of joy that we experienced is the exact amount of joy that we chose to experience. Kind of the good news, and maybe for some the not so good news. But for me, the bottom line is that joy is an aspect of God, a God quality. And since we were created by God, out of God, in its image and likeness, then right where we are, each and every single one of us, joy resides. It is who and what we are at our very core. God is the source of all joy, and that presence of God is within us. Not in the people or the places or the possessions or the positions of the external world of form. It is already within us. So in order to find the joy within, we must look within. In order to find the joy within, we must be willing to let go of things that undermine our joy. In order to find the joy within, we must be willing to do the inner work to become aware of our negative tendencies, our emotional reactivity, or our inability to appreciate and utilize the resources that we already have within us. Archbishop Desmond Tutu says, we create most of our suffering, so it should be logical that we also have the ability to create more joy. It simply depends on the attitudes, the perspectives, and the reactions that we bring to situations and to our relationships with other people. So, given that, what is it that we need to be or need to do in order to allow the innate joy within us to be expressed no matter what? No matter what. In their book, Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama describe what they call the 8 pillars of life. Now, these are the positive qualities that we need to cultivate in order to experience more joy. And I know you'll love them because they're practical. Now, 4 are qualities of the mind, and they include perspective, humility, humor, and acceptance. The other 4 are qualities of the heart, and they include forgiveness, gratitude, compassion, and generosity. We'll begin at the beginning. Perspective. A healthy perspective is the foundation of joy, because the way that we see the world is the way that we experience the world. Changing the way that we see the world in turn changes how we feel and how we behave, and that in turn changes the world itself. The invitation is to look at the events of your life from a wider perspective. Sometimes when we look from one particular angle, we may feel bad. We may feel discouraged. But when we look from a wider angle at that very same event, we are able to reframe the event in a more positive light. We are free to see new opportunities, free to reduce our sense of anxiety and worry and fear, and free to experience greater joy. Now, while changing our emotions can be hard, changing our perspective can be relatively easy because we have dominion over our minds. We have the ability to change our thoughts. It's not looking through rose-colored glasses or being some kind of a Pollyanna. What it actually is recognizing that what we think of reality is only part of the picture. Humility. Both the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop say that humility is essential to any possibility of joy. When we have a wider perspective, we have a natural understanding of our place in the grander scheme of life. They say, as human beings, we can't solve everything or control all aspects of life. We need others. We are not created for independence or self-sufficiency, but for interdependence and mutual support. We are just one person. One person on a planet with 7 billion people. As a child of God, we are special, but no more special than any other person. Having humility is having the ability to recognize that our gifts, those things that make us special, are our gifts from God. Humility allows us to celebrate the gifts of others while not denying our own gifts or hiding them under a bushel basket. They also say that when we have humility, we take life less seriously. We're able to laugh at ourselves. And they told a story about Archbishop Desmond Tutu. He was on a flight traveling from Dublin to Johannesburg in the middle of the anti-apartheid struggle. A flight attendant came up to him and told him that there was a woman who was asking if he would autograph a book for her. He said that he recalled that he tried to look humble and modest. Although he was thinking in his heart that at least there were some people who recognized a good thing when they saw it. But when the woman handed him the book and he took out his pen, she said, "You are Bishop Muzorewa, yes?" Humility and the ability to laugh at ourselves. Which brings me to humor. People who are always laughing have a sense of abandon and ease. Humor can connect us. Humor can unite us. Humor has a way of allowing us to see our shared humanity, our shared vulnerabilities, our shared frailties. Yes, life can be hard, but laughter has a way of allowing us to come to terms with the uncertainty and the struggles. Humor and the ability to laugh at ourselves is something that we can actually cultivate. If we start looking for the humor in life right now, we are sure to find it. Absolutely sure to find it. Acceptance. Acceptance is the ability to accept our life in all of its pain, in all of its imperfection, in all of its beauty. While we might think differently, acceptance is actually the opposite of resignation and defeat. Desmond Tutu says, "We are meant to live in joy. This does not mean that our life will be easy or painless. It means that we can turn our faces to the wind and and accept that this is the storm that we must pass through. We cannot succeed by denying what exists. The acceptance of reality is the only place from which change can begin. Acceptance allows us to move into the fullness of joy. It allows us to be in the flow of life, in the present moment, living our lives in such a way that we are not in resistance to life, nor are we railing against life because it's not what we want it to be. The invitation is to recognize that acceptance is not a passive way to live our lives, but a very powerful way to live. The invitation is to see life accurately, to see life rightly, beyond all of the expectations or the projections or the judgments or the criticisms or the distortions that we typically bring to life. When we are able to bring acceptance into our lives, we cut through all of that resistance. And we're able to relax and we're able to feel the joy that is actually our birthright. When we accept what is happening right now, we become curious about what might happen next, and curiosity is joyful. Forgiveness. Forgiveness is the only way to heal ourselves and to be free from the past. Without forgiveness, we remain tethered to the person or persons that we believe have harmed us. We are bound to the feelings of bitterness and victimhood. Unforgiveness leads to ongoing feelings of resentment and anger and even hostility. Until we are able to forgive, someone or something holds the key to our happiness. Someone or something holds the key to our expression of our inner joy. When we forgive, we take that control back. We take the control back of the experiences of our lives. The invitation today is to know that every one of us is exactly where we are supposed to be on our spiritual path at any given moment. To know, or at least be willing to know, that if people knew better, they would speak better and they would act better. The invitation is to be willing to accept that there is not one of us in this room that has never said or done something that we wished we would not have said or done. There is not one of us in this room that has at some point or another held someone out of our hearts because of anger or retaliation or fear. So the invitation is to recognize these truths and to be willing to forgive ourselves and ultimately to be willing to forgive everyone else. To do our own inner work so that we can once again become a space and place of love and compassion and joy. Gratitude. Here at the Triangle Center for Spiritual Living, we often talk about, does this sweet picture, yes? We have often talked about the significance of gratitude, and all faith traditions recognize its importance. Gratitude is the recognition of the gift of life that we have been given. It's an amazing gift. It's the recognition of all that we actually already have. And it's the recognition that all that we have experienced has brought us to this exact moment. Gratitude is the elevation of enjoyment and is actually a very natural response to life itself. When we are grateful, we draw unto ourselves more and more things to be grateful about. When we are grateful, we act out of a sense of being and having enough, and not out of a sense of scarcity. Brother Stindl Rast says, "A grateful world is a world of joyful people. Grateful people are joyful people. Compassion. The truth is that we are really wired from the moment that we arrived on the planet to be caring of and for one another. We are social animals, and our survival depends on the rest of our communities. Compassion is a sense of concern that arises when we are confronted with another's suffering and feel motivated to see the suffering relieved. This concern for others is something that's very precious. This concern for others can take us out of ourselves and out of our own lives and allow us to feel deeply aligned with that seed of compassion that we arrived on the planet with. The Dalai Lama says that too much self-centered thinking can be the source of suffering in our lives. The incredible thing about compassion is that when we are thinking about alleviating the suffering of others, our own suffering is reduced. That even in the face of our own struggles or in the midst of our own deep anguish, that compassion has this alchemy that can soothe our pain. It might not completely take it away, but at the very least, it can make it more bearable. When we arrived with this seed of compassion within us, knowing that it is already there, the truth is that we can also cultivate it. We can also cultivate it. We can learn to develop it and then to extend it to ourselves and to others and to our families and to our communities and further out into the entire world. When we see compassion is also seems to be very contagious. I don't know if you've ever felt that in your life. But when we see someone else being very compassionate, then we are more likely to be compassionate ourselves. I can think about those commercials where someone does something for someone and then someone sees that and then they do something for someone else and someone's witnessing that and then they do someone on and on and on. Yes. So compassion is contagious. When we are able to recognize our shared humanity, then compassion comes easily and our own lives and the lives of everyone on the planet are transformed. Generosity. Psychologists say that generous people tend to be emotionally and mentally healthier. That generosity weakens negative forces and strengthens positive forces. That when we are willing to give of our time, talent, and treasure, that the emotions of greed and jealousy and fear fall to the wayside and the emotions of love and joy grow stronger. I love what the Buddha said about the benefits of generosity. He said, if we understood the benefits of generosity as deeply as he did, we would never want to eat a single meal without offering to share it. Isn't that beautiful? So the invitation today is to remember that we were created by joy. That we were created out of joy, that it is who and what we are at our very core. The key to experiencing it in our lives is to let go of anything unlike it and to cultivate these 8 pillars of joy: perspective, humility, humor, acceptance, forgiveness, gratitude, compassion, and generosity. And when we are able to do so, then we will create the right and perfect vessel for the joy that is already in us to flow through us and be experienced in our lives. And so it is. So I just invite us to close our outer eyes and to turn within. Take a minute to turn away from the world of form and to allow our awareness of the power and presence of God that is within us to expand. Ooh, when I do that, I am acutely aware of the love, the joy, the creativity, the wisdom, the kindness, and the compassion that lies within me. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt I was created by God in God's image and likeness. And just as I know that this is my truth, I know that it is true for each and every person here today, that each of us is a unique and divine expression of the divine, imbued with so many wonderful gifts, imbued with the allness of God, a hologram of God in its fullness, in its wholeness. And it is from this place of deep and abiding connection to God, to each other, and to life itself that I speak these words about and for each of us this morning, truly knowing that we are spiritual beings having a human incarnation. And that while our experience of life can be sometimes hard, that the truth is that back of the perceptions, the judgments, the criticisms, the frustrations, the sadness, the grief, lies God, lies peace, lies love, lies joy. And that it is who and what we are at our very core. I claim for each of us this morning that as we view our life from a greater perspective, as we recognize our place in the grander scheme, as we appreciate and acknowledge the gifts of everyone, including ourselves, as we find humor in life, as we accept life as it is, knowing that this too shall change, as we begin to forgive ourselves and everyone else, as we are grateful for all that we have, as we nurture the seed of compassion that is within us, and as we generously give of our time and talent and treasure, that joy is the experience of our lives. I claim ease and grace around all of this for each of us, that truly we can choose. We have dominion over our thoughts, and we can choose joy. And I'm so grateful to know this truth and to speak these words. So grateful for prayer. So grateful for the way it works, that my words are clothed in form even as they are spoken. And so I speak them and release them and allow God to be God. And I invite each of us to anchor this prayer for ourselves and for each other as I anchor it for us, simply by saying, "And so it is." Amen. Amen.